Um, Hi, everyone. Welcome, one and all, again to another episode in season 3 of Unrehearsed Futures, um, where we are constantly dealing with what it is to be in a space of heavy instability and noise and madness and the chaosmos. And I'm just glad to see old and new here. These talks are happening every second Thursday, and they are worth coming to because for me it's been just an extended seminar that I have had the pleasure of attending and learning from late in my life. And it's great because I never thought I was going back to school, and then Unrehearsed Futures happened, and I feel like I'm getting a whole new education. And I hope it's the same for all of you. Enjoy. Without further ado, our interlocutor and curator for the day, Amy Russell, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Jehan. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. And thank you especially to my two wonderful guests, Sabine Choukair and Nilüfer Gros, who are wonderful colleagues and friends. I'm very lucky to have such great friends. And they have very kindly agreed to honor me and us with this conversation that we're having. We decided this season in Unrehearsed Futures to really embrace flux and really embrace the current moment. And so Nilüfer and Sabine and I really talked about how our conversation can appear as a foreground against the background of these changing times. So we've entitled this session Pedagogy Under Fire. And we're discussing what it is to transmit and recreate theater making in the context of war. And Sabine and Nilu both have experience of situations of, I think, what for most of us would also constitute extraordinary tensions and conflict. Sabine with her work in Beirut and other places, and Nilüfer in her work in Turkey, in Mardin. But I'm going to let them introduce themselves because they can speak much more eloquently than I can about their experience. I would just end up reading things which nobody enjoys. So it's we like this tradition of having our guests introduce themselves. But as you introduce yourselves, Nilu and Sabine, it would be very interesting, I think, for everyone in the room to understand the context in which you're working. So don't worry about if you might digress into something slightly didactic, because we really don't understand, most of us in the room are not going to really understand the context of the countries and the regions in which you're working. So please don't hesitate to go into these questions in detail as you introduce yourselves. So Nilu, would you be able to and willing to start with your introduction?
Yes. Thank you, Amy. This is actually very, very exciting to be here with you, with Sabine, with the whole team of Unrehearsed Futures, and have a time to talk about this work that is very important for me. So I'm from Istanbul, and I come from a visual arts background into theater and then to LISPA. I spent most of my adult life outside of Turkey, studying, and I have always been, in a way, thrown out of Turkey to study, to do things, to create work. And finally, in 2011, I decided to go back. It became a necessity to go back and to actually deal with what the country I come from is, and with all its problematics. And after working in Istanbul for about 2 years, I went to Mardin. So I'm cutting it a bit short in my background. Mardin, when I went there in 2013, there was a peace process happening at the time, which meant that the region had a almost 40-year-long conflict between the Turkish state and the Kurdish guerrilla PKK, which at that point came to a ceasefire, meaning that, and it meant a lot for the people in that region, and it was very new, very unheard of until that moment, and of course, as you would expect from the Turkish state, 2 years later, that ceasefire was broken, and a huge war broke out in the region. One must say that Mardin and this region, the southeastern Anatolian region, and the Mesopotamian region, so to speak, when I was there, and for the longest time, and even for centuries, has been living multiple wars, layered wars, one on top of the other. So when I was there, there was a big war between Kurdish forces and the Turkish forces. There was also ISIS really present in the region at that time. Suicide bombings and a whole and the spill of Syrian civil war in the region also. So at the same time, we were seeing Yazidi refugees coming and crossing the border to take refuge in Mardin and the region, and other conflicts on top of that. And well, inside all this, I found myself looking at a landscape of conflicts, not only horizontal, but also vertical. So the region is also the place, for example, where the Armenian genocide happened. So the people being exiled from the now northeastern Turkey and eastern Turkey, eastern Anatolia, have been forced to have been deported, going from this region, and so which means that what I saw first was a war, a conflict that I knew was happening since I'm born. So a 40-year-old conflict in the surface between, which is called the Kurdish conflict. And then there is ghosts, and then there is the Syrian civil war that is spilling over to this region, and layers of other histories, ghosts of the genocide, other massacres that had happened in this region. So when I started working there, I had to dig slowly, and it took years. It still continues. And I was teaching at the university, so I started a storytelling club, which turned into the Crossing Theater Company, where I started working with people on testimonies. So we had to find ways of taking people's testimonies with them and finding ways of presenting them without crossing over too politically, so that we wouldn't be attacked by regional authorities. And so I found myself inventing ways of creating witness account scapes. And we can talk about it more and more, but this process moved from telling tales to each other to working with testimonies of that moment for young people, to the mothers and their grandmothers. So every time, in a way, we wrote a couple of plays like this, but every time somebody was coming into the group, they were coming with their own stories and the stories of whom they knew and their mothers, fathers, and the sonorities that they heard while living in this place. So it was always a processes of writing, rewriting, introducing more stories, taking out some, and as people came in and out of the group, the text developed. And the staging also developed with new people coming in. So one play would be written and rewritten 3-4 times with each presentation. I can talk about the dynamics of it in detail as we go on, but as a whole, it's just about this. But there's a lot of details. So
that's great. That's great, Nilüfer. Thank you. Just sorry to approach it from such a far away perspective, a very outside perspective, but if it might be helpful to just name, if you would, the stakeholders in the situation in Mardin and what their agendas might be. So you're definitely navigating the territory between different stakeholders. Could you just sort of name them out, just because for clarity?
Yeah, so I went to Mardin to work at the university. So there's one university in Mardin, that's Mardin Artuklu University, and to establish the fine arts department that was going to also have a theater and performance department. But anyway, so I started in university, the group of theater and storytelling. And because in that region, the institutions are so politically determined, I had to escape from these institutions that are under Turkish government control, to become invisible and to build the Crossing Theater Company as a space outside of all these stakeholders. So that I could open a space without my colonial positioning or being the Turkish person coming to this region that is more inhabited by mostly Kurdish people, also Assyrian people, once Armenian people, and a whole variety of cultures. So when you said stakeholders, you meant this, yes?
Sorry, yes, exactly. So you've got sort of Turkish governmental agenda stakeholder, and then you also mentioned regional, sort of regional influences. What would those be?
Yes, exactly. There's also, of course, the invisible forces of the region, which are the Kurdish guerrilla and PKK, and somehow you are not told this for years and years. You may just not know that this is there, but there is. You see after one point that everyone, every Kurdish family has kind of a connection, not a real connection, but even an emotional connection with it. But it takes a while to realize that there is this relationship between you as the person coming from Istanbul to teach and these students who become your students there. So there's this hierarchical relationship between you and those people who have been considered for a long time a people whose how to say this, who have been in a region where there's terrorist activity, and that what we call terrorist is actually their people from their families who are going and joining the Kurdish movement.
Right. Okay.
And so, yes, but it was exactly because of this that I wanted to take the theater group out of the university and out of all other political institutions. Also, the mayor that was at that time of HDP, which is a Kurdish, pro-Kurdish party. I wanted to take it away from all sides to put it in a place where I can open the space and people can say what they want to say, regardless of influences from everywhere.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay, so as you said, there will be more chance to get into the detail of your work in this situation. And by the way, I didn't mention, but it's our custom in Unrehearsed Futures. If you have any questions or thoughts, you can already begin to put them into the chat, and I'll try to field them and send them also to our guests. So Sabine, would you like to introduce yourself and your work, and again, feel free to go into the context of the situation of your work.
Yeah, thanks, Nilu. It's great to hear in depth about what you're doing. So I live in Lebanon, and to put you in the context a bit, I grew up during the civil war here. So we had a war between, Christians and Muslims, and then later we had the Israeli invasion. So I grew up in this in this kind of life, and I've been displaced so many times. We changed 13 different houses when I was a kid, going from one part to the other, and then when I was about to start university, I studied theater in Lebanon, and then I went to LISPA in London. That's where I met Amy, and she was my teacher, and many other, inspiring people that I still work with until now. And I think before even leaving Lebanon, I've always felt like theater is my tool to be like my tool to use in life. And I've always been interested in working with people more so than being just like an actress on stage, or even though I've done this a lot. So before leaving to London, I started working with the Palestinian refugees. And in Lebanon, we have a lot of Palestinian camps. So Palestinian people who fled from Palestine and the occupied land came to Lebanon, and they live in they have a very difficult situation in the country here because they have no legal papers. They're not Lebanese. They are refugees, and they've been refugees for the past 60 years or more, and so it's generation after generation. So I was working a lot with Palestinian refugees in Palestinian camps, and then after coming back, I came back really to Lebanon. It's funny, around the same time, Nilu, you went back to Turkey, like in 2011. And this is also when the Syrian revolution started. And then we started having an influx of Syrian refugees arriving to the country. And all of a sudden we became like we're a very small country, but we had the biggest percentage-wise Syrian refugees. And let's say in the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon, at one point we had 84,000 refugees, Syrian refugees, and 48,000 Lebanese people. So that the Syrian refugees were double the Lebanese people. So the situation became became really tricky. Everybody was on the edge. And I had started a group called Clown Me In here, which is, you know, a group of clowns, and it started from a real need to be on the street and to say no to oppression, to try to find, you know, social justice, and just use clowning and the street and art on the street to say what we want to say. And with the Syrian refugees and the Iraqis arriving to Lebanon, I came up with an idea that we called the Caravan, which is a street performance that is performed on the roof of a van, actually, and that tours to all these different villages and cities around Lebanon. And it's based on Syrian refugees' stories, personal stories, and on Lebanese, like the host community stories. And it was meant to like go to the places, people listen to the stories, see actors on this caravan, and then open a conversation, talk about these stories. And it was the interesting part was, you know, it was stories of refugees, very personal stories, but the aim was really to go to these communities and the most hostile communities and be like, here are our stories that are very similar to Lebanese people's stories during the war. And so let's talk about that and let's see what we can do with this. And there's an important thing that I should mention as well is we were occupied by the Syrian regime in Lebanon. So many Lebanese people hate the Syrian regime and then also hate the Syrians. So also that was, the country was people were half with the Syrian refugees, like loving them and helping them, and half were just against them, being like, why are you here? Just leave. So that was like, so the caravan continued, and it's on until now. We've been collecting stories from different refugees, different people going through different things, and having different productions every year that we tour with in the whole country. We travel to the borders, we travel everywhere, and we perform on the street. So that's one part. And with this performance, we went to Tunisia with these stories because, you know, refugees were there as well. And in Sweden, went to Sweden, did a whole different production based on stories of immigrants who live there. And refugees who just arrived. So that's one part of my work. Another part is all the activism we do with Clown Me in Lebanon, and because the country is going through a terrible financial crisis. We had the worst, you know, I mean, in August 2020, we had the explosion that displaced 300,000 families and destroyed so many houses. I mean, even us, our team, you know, many of us were hardly hit by the explosion. And then I would say everybody in Lebanon was emotionally wrecked after the explosion. Obviously. So with Clown Me In, we do clown performances in all parts of Lebanon as well, and in refugee camps. And after the explosion, of course, we were just going to all these destroyed places and working with communities and just performing, just to, you know, spread joy and laughter and be there and have a connection, a different connection, and really spread laughter. So that's another thing. We're always in all protests as clowns. demanding our rights, and we're still, we consider ourselves in a non-ending lab where we try things on the street and see what works and what doesn't. And we're often let to be on the streets without problems because they all think, oh, they're clowns, or they're coming to do like stupid things, so they can be there. So we're the ones who get, you know, on the front lines in the protest because they think, oh, they're stupid, they can do whatever they want, which, you know, is a cool thing. So and we do a lot of also short videos to advocate for different things that has to do with social justice, the environment, the refugee crisis, and so on and so on. So that's another part. And then we have a school here that works with professional performers and actors and activists and gives them tool to be able for them to go do what we're doing. So we become more and more in the country, because we feel like the street performances are making a change with time in a way or another, and are opening conversations. And so we have the school that's really focused on different tools that help people to go then work with communities, whether refugee communities, host communities, or communities together, to come up with their street performance, to advocate for whatever they, or to say whatever they want to say, and then go tour with it. And then on the side as well, I've been following the refugee route, let's say, with Clown Mehan and Clowns Without Borders, by performing in different areas and countries. So really following where the refugees are going. So from Lebanon to Turkey to Greece to the Balkans to different parts in Europe. And it's been such an interesting journey to really like meet people in Lebanon or in Jordan, and then meet them again in Germany and see a few years later how they're doing and what they're doing, and then add this to the whole story. So that's a bit of a background of the work I'm doing here and abroad. And I don't know if
that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sabine. I was just wondering again. So, from a very outside perspective, you mentioned the importance of themes of social justice. Could you briefly name the themes so that we can imagine what's of particular relevance in the context you've been working in?
I mean, mainly, if we're talking about the refugees, they have absolutely no rights in the country. So they have no legal papers. They cannot do many jobs. They cannot work. So they end up just being refugees, waiting for UN and other international organizations to give them aid and help them, instead of being present in the country and you know, adding to the country. And that's like one of the main thing. And obviously for everyone in this country, the least human rights are not there. We're in a country where people have at least, I mean, I live in a building where we have at least 11 hours of power cuts per day. So we have no electricity. We're the country with like an excess of water and underground water, but then we have no infrastructure or no ways to have access to clean water, which is a disaster. I mean, it's endless, really. It's endless problems that we go through. We have our political system is really based on corruption, and we have the same people getting elected every day, every time on every election. So this is like more and more problems that are, you know, that are affecting everyone. And there's also, the country has, or used to be, we're all minorities, so minority Christians, minority Muslims, minority Druze, minority, I mean, all sorts of different religions, and this also affects why the Syrian and Palestinians are not able to get a to become Lebanese citizenship, because mostly they're let's say they're Muslims, and then the country doesn't want anybody, they want everybody to stay, like all these minorities that feel like I want to stay in my sect and with my people and be afraid of the others, because who knows what's going to happen at any time, and so on and so on. I mean, I can go on forever with the problems, but
that's wonderful. Thanks. That you've both painted very vivid pictures of your work, and we also have, just to make it really, really vivid, you've both given us some video clips, which Falguni will hopefully be able to play for us all to see. So,
which one do you want me to play first, Amy?
Should we start with Nilü's and then move on to Sabine's?
Okay, sounds good. Just a sec.
Cool, great.
Belki de cadılar zamanında doğmuştu benim annem. Ya da annesinden sonra cehenneme dönüşmüştü deniyor.
Olacak inanma. Bilinçaltımızda büyüdük.
Gündüz olacak mıydı? Yavrum nedir? Bırak.
Ben gideceğim.
Ben yakalayacağım. Ağlama. Gerçekten.
13 yaşına gelince babam dedi seni evlendireceğiz. İstediğin bir kız var mı?
Komşunun kızı vardı. O olabilir dedi. Babam kafama demir ülkeyi fırlattı. Hayır, kuzeninle evleneceksin dedi.
Karneye eğilmiş gibi tabirler vardır Kürtçe'de. Ve Kürtçe doktorlara gidilirdi o dönemler. Hani belki ağır kaldırmaktan rahmin yamulmuştur dediler. İşte o zaman öğrendim eskiden bayanların nasıl.
Görücüsü geliyor, aynı gün annemi okuldan alıyorlar. Aynı gün sadece imam nikahı kıyılıyor o kadar. Hadi git kocan girecek demişler. Annem ağlamış, istememiş. Yalvarmış beni odaya göndermeyi diye.
Beni vermişler. Ben hiçbir şeyden habersiz eve görücü gelmiş. Çocuğu benle aynı odaya koyuyorlar. Çocuk bana bakıyor, ben çocuğa bakıyorum.
15 yaş büyük biriyle evlendirmişler teyzemi. Zaten onu da hiç görmemiş teyzem.
Diyor ben gittiğimde çocuk gibi ağların üzerinde oynuyordu. Kaynanam dürtüyordu beni. Sen diyordu, evli bir bensin. Sonra kalkıp yerime oturuyordu. Gelinin üzerine kalın bir duvak örtülü. Horsepi derler. Gelinle birlikte gelen kadın. Kanına bakacak olan kadına.
Teyzem sordu bana. Ne yapacağını biliyor musun dedi. Evet, biliyorum dedim. Nasıl bilmiyorum dedim teyzem.
Annemin ağlayışları geliyormuş o gece. Hıçkıra hıçkıra ağlıyormuş.
Hey tamam kızdır.
O odaya gitmemek için çok uğraştım. Akşam oluyor, abimin kapısını çalıyorum, açmıyor. Annemin kapısını çalıyorum, açmıyor. Diğer abimin kapısını çalıyorum, açmıyor. Sesleniyorum, kimse cevap vermiyor.
Annem halay sever. Ama düğün dernek için değil.
Başını gökyüzüne kaldırır, etrafında döner. Canı yanar, derin nefesler alır. İnsan ancak görmek isterse görür.
Ben müzik dinleyemem. Yani kendi içimde söylerim bazen ama müzik dinlemem. Çünkü müzik dinlediğim zaman bazı şeyleri hatırlıyorum. Ruhum acı çekiyor. Hiç dinlememek daha iyi. Anlattıkları şeyler bazı insanların içinde olan şeyler. Gerçek şeyler.
Falguni, is it okay to play Sabine's now?
Hey, yes, just 1 sec.
Sorry.
مشروع الكرفانة مقسم لعدة أقسام. أول قسم هو إنه نلاقي الحكاية، بشتغل مع الكبار، بشتغل مع النسوان، بشتغل مع الرجال، بشتغل مع الولاد، بشتغل مع المراهقين. هي عبر المسرح وعبر تمارين خاصة بالحكواتي. أوقات بيعرفوا إنه عم يحكوا عن قصتهم وأوقات ما بيعرفوا، بس بالأخير كل القصص اللي بيطلعوا فيها إن كانت خيالية ولا مش خيالية بتدلنا كتير على أشياء هن عاشوها من قبل أو عم بيعيشوها هلأ. المرحلة الثانية من الكرفانة هي تسجيل القصص يلي بتكون تجمعت بالمرحلة الأولى. بما إنه الشغل عم بيكون بقلب مخيمات مختلفة، نحن منركب استوديو صوت خاص فينا بقلب الخيمة، فبتصير خيمة بقلب خيمة.
Devising and creating physical performances to go hand in hand with the recordings that we've made of these true stories.
Right, and then we're using puppets, big objects.
عم نفرجي للمجتمع صورته الحقيقية تنشوف يعني كيف رح يتفاعل مع هذه الصورة اللي رح يشوفها عن حاله.
7:03 مسرحية الكرفانة والعالم يسمع على عين المريسي. تفضلوا احضرونا الساعة 4 بمسرحية الكرفانة.
قصص مسجلة للاجئين سوريين. أهلا وسهلا فيكم.
لك يا أهلا وسهلا فيكم وشرفتونا بالكرفانة.
تك تك تك كان بالحالة.
فنحن كنا عم بين هول العالم اللي مش قادرين نتعلم لأنه نحن 4.
عميدة تعي جيبي لي كاسة شاي.
حاضر.
جو إيجابي جدا، يعني أنا كنت مع بنتي عمرها 3 سنين عم نرقص، وولاد أختي كمان كانوا موجودين معنا. أنا انبسطت كتير، كان عندي نهار كله ستريس، شغل كتير صعب كان. هلا اليوم حس حالي ريلاكس ورايح على البيت هلا، وانا كتير مبسوط. يعطيكم الف عافيه.
رغم قصر الوقت كانت فكره كتير حلوه وكان الحضور مميز وانتم كلكم شاطرين، واللي اهم من كل شيء الهدف، الفكره، الهدف اللي انتم عم توصلوها.
المساحه الصغيره اللي هن كانوا عم يمثلوا عليها يلي كانت عم تعطي افكار كتير كتير واسعه لحقوق الطفل ولواجباتنا اللي علينا للطفل لحتى نحميه.
الكرفانة وصلت على السويد وتحديداً على هامستاد بجنوب البلد. اشتغلت مع أولاد، مع رجال، مع نسوان من كذا بلد، سوريين، عراقيين، صوماليين، لبنانية، فلسطينية، سويدية، ألمان، أمريكان ودنماركية. عالم خلقوا بالسويد وعالم وصلوا جديد على السويد أو وصلوا من زمان كتير، وعيال تركوا السويد من زمان من قبل 1900.
مسرحية الكرفانة حتبلش بعد 5 دقايق. أهلا وسهلا فيكم.
كلياتها هي قصص واقعية عم بيعانوا منها كل السوريين لأنه ما في حدا بينتظم بالنوم بكير مثل السويديين.
Det är viktigt att vi öppnar våra gränser och tar emot människor på flykt och ger dem möjlighet till ett nytt liv.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot, Falguni. So Nilu and Sabine, we have about 5 minutes left on the recorded section of the program. I just wanted to ask you, it seems that you both are really using personal testimony and stories from real stories in these situations of conflict. What are some of the dangers of working with real stories? I mean, they're incontestably true. So what can happen and how do you deal with it?
Shall I go ahead? Yeah. Okay. So obviously, in my case, I work. Most of the group is Kurdish, and the politics of the region is never separate from people's life experience. And there are sometimes testimonies that are really, really hard to even hear. And there's a couple of things. First thing, it's how do we put this on stage and still protect the whole group from being arrested by the Turkish government? So that's one thing, because it's very important. One of the dangers is that everything is being stopped, interrupted, closed down, and then that project is gone, and then we'll have to start another thing. And I had to particularly fight against being closed down, and it was more important for me to keep the theater space going on than make a political point that will just interrupt the process. You see, that's one thing. And on the other side, sometimes something really horrible happens and you cannot not say anything. For instance, when there was the Surge bombing in the frontier, ISIS bombed young university students who were trying to cross border to see the revolution in Rojava. I won't get into the history of that, but we can talk about it later. But people who came from all over Turkey died in a suicide bombing by ISIS. So there I stopped writing, and I said, okay, we are not making theater anymore. There's no point after this point, And I had to find a way to talk about this. As soon as I would talk about it openly, we would be stopped, and perhaps, I don't even know, had an investigation. But once my first reaction to this horrifying event passed, I started noting the lamentations that were being told, that were being sung, voiced at the time. So I noted, and at the end I found myself with again a landscape of lamentations that weren't actually saying that there is something, a bombing happened in Suruç and young people died, but it was, you heard some of it in the video. It actually extracts words or little sayings like he's hungry. She's the mother screams he's hungry, because they are putting him in the grave, and she's screaming he's hungry. So I started just going full on to what is really, really emotionally said, and extracting and putting them side by side to form a landscape. Sorry, I can go on for hours about this
no,
process.
yeah.
But these are the dangers, and at one point, the regional they started. They didn't know how to deal with me. They didn't have anyone making work like this before me in that region. you see the Turkish intelligence never, or the authorities there never knew how to deal with me, someone who just comes from Istanbul, from a very different family. Doing this work there was something that they couldn't deal with. So I actually used that, and I used my position as the vice dean of the faculty at university to escape a lot of authoritarian interventions, if you will. And at one point, the head of the Turkish intelligence came to see the play, and they called me 2 minutes before the curtain goes up, saying the head of the Turkish intelligence will come and see your work now. And I said, okay, or we go to the police station now, or like, yeah. And they didn't. They couldn't say anything to these things. They didn't know how to blame me, you know.
Yeah. Great. So you use, it seems like poetry is really important, or like subtlety is a kind of important.
Yeah, it's not even poetry, just going to a point where they actually are not capable of elaborating an accusation on you. You see, it's, if you know how they can destroy you, it's almost sarcastic and ironic, and you start playing with it. It may or may not work always, but yes, this is
That's fantastic. Sabine, does that question mean anything to you in the context of your different experiences?
I mean, for us also, I mean, of course, the way we record the stories, we use a lot of humor. So that's also important, because we get a lot with humor. We get a lot out. People laugh, and then they realize afterwards that, oh shit, that was hard. Or so we use humor a lot in stories and in the way, or if the story doesn't have humor, we use it on stage. So in the images we're creating. So that's one way to deal with it. Another thing is, we always get permits to be on the streets. Like, it's not a problem to be on the street to get the permits, obviously, because we're called Clown Me In, and they think it's okay. So many times they don't read our scripts before giving us the permits. And then we try to have an ally in every place we go to, with either, you know, the municipality or some people who are responsible of the city. So we know, and especially in the most hostile places, we know that something will happen. One person is gonna protest after watching, or say, oh, what you're doing is bad, and these stories are bad, and we don't care about these people. So we always have like a way out in terms of by having somebody on the ground who's to our side, and who has a higher, in the hierarchy, he has a higher, you know, how do you say this? Just like, he's on a higher level to be for that. And honestly, every time, I mean, we have these things where we only perform when we have behind us there's a wall, so we can't be attacked from the back. We always park our cars where we can leave straight away in case we have to. You know, we have all these techniques that thankfully we didn't use. We haven't had to use any. We haven't used any ever, but we have them, and that's it.
That's extremely graphic, that you have a wall at your back. Wow. Thank you so much for this portion of the program. We like to stop the recording at this point so that people can speak very freely and